think even for the most ardent Auburn supporter, they would be willing and able to tell you that Nick Saban is the greatest college football coach of all time. Even the biggest Alabama haters will tell you you can't look past what that program accomplished and what Nick Saban accomplished during his tenure as a college football head coach, and now at the age of 72, stepping aside. There's not really a strong argument that you can make to say that it's not the truth. It's not what it is. And whether or not even the most unreasonable fan can look that aside or not, I don't know. But I think it's important to say Nick Saban is the greatest college football coach of all time, no matter how difficult that might be to grapple with. ESPN.com released a pretty long expose today about Nick Saban's decision to retire and essentially how he gave Greg Byrne, the Alabama AD, about a year heads up of, I don't know, man, that after the 2022 season, he said, we're going to have to start looking at this on a year-to-year basis because I don't know how much longer I can do this. If you are a longtime watcher / listener of the show, I told you about a third of the way through the 2023 season that Nick Saban was on his way out the door, was going to be a college game day analyst in 2024. I was right. Because when you go back and think about, okay, why is Nick Saban agreeing to a weekly appearance on the Pat McAfee show? Like, the guy's never been really motivated by money. The idea that he's always been preoccupied with getting the biggest payday has really never been his MO. So getting paid from the Pat McAfee show wasn't his motivation. What was his motivation? He was destined to enjoy his final season of college football, and I think he did that as much as one could. But the reporting, which we'll probably talk about tomorrow as well, because there's a nugget in there about Alabama, whether or not they might have offered the job to Mike Norvell from Florida State and what Florida State would have done if Mike Norvell had left for Alabama. Another topic for another day. But in the reporting, Nick Saban basically told the AD, hey, we're going to talk about this year after year. And I think the comments from Nick Saban in this report and also from Greg Byrne, the athletic director, just show you that it really cements home the fact that Nick Saban is the best to ever do it. It really does, because even in deciding to retire, Nick Saban is viewing everything from the 10,000-foot view. He has the eagle eye approach of like making sure that he's, even in his decision to step away, he's making sure that he's making the best decision. And I find it incredibly admirable the way he talked about it. Because when he's asked about, and he said, part of it is like, come on, man. Because he talked about how he didn't like the way that Alabama, the players, handled the overtime loss in the Rose Bowl. That he said, that he didn't like that, didn't like the response. He was really disappointed in the way that the players acted after the game. You got to win with class. You got to lose with class. We had our opportunities to win the game, and we didn't do it. And then showing your ass and being frustrated and throwing helmets and doing that stuff, that's not who we are and what we've promoted in our program. The part of that is like, the flip side of that can be like, don't you want your players to be invested and emotional after a loss? Now you can argue that like, yeah, but I don't want them throwing their helmets and yada, yada, yada. There's two ways to look at everything. I take the opposite view of, I would rather have kids that are invested and heartbroken and showing their frustration and anger by throwing shit rather than being like, gee willikers, Mr. Saban, we almost had him. I'd rather be angry. But after that, Nick Saban talked about meeting with the players after that loss and knowing that in his mind, it's a possibility he doesn't come back. And again, there's two ways to take everything, but his quote here, I think, is really interesting. He says, I thought we could have a hell of a team next year. And then maybe 70 or 80% of the players you talk to, all they want to know is two things. What assurances do I have that I'm going to play because they're thinking about transferring? And how much are you going to pay me? Our program here was always built on how much value can we create for the future and your personal development, academic success in graduating and developing an NFL career on the field. So I'm saying to myself, maybe this doesn't work anymore, that the goals and aspirations are just different and that it's all about how much money I can make as a college player. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's never been what we were all about, and it's not why we had success through the years. Now, there's a cynical view here, right? And it's one that me, as a cynical person, I have not taken in the college football world. That there are those obviously closer to the game than me who have said that the sport is crippled by NIL, the transfer portal, etc., and that it is becoming increasingly more difficult for coaches to deal with those things, and that it's making the game less fun, yada, yada, yada. I view that as poppycock malarkey, balderdash bullcrap. That if coaches who are paid millions of dollars can't deal with the fact that players have now the slightest bit of power and money-making ability, that is not the sport's fault. That is not an indictment on the current state of college football. Are there things that need to be addressed and fixed? Absolutely 100%. I can't argue with that. But the idea that the sport's going to be driven away, good coaches are going to be driven away, they're either just going to retire or go to the NFL because they can't handle the transfer portal and having to re-recruit their own players. So you have to give opportunities to the guys that are on your roster, or you have to treat them with the baseline respect of a human being, and that's too much to ask for, is ridiculous to me. But that's not the stance that I think Nick Saban is saying here. He's not saying NIL and the transfer portal are bad. He's just saying that's not how I want to operate. And if that is how the sport is going to operate, then I'll go ahead and peace out. But rather than, and look at this quote, he says that the aspirations are just different. Goals and aspirations of kids today are just different. He went on to talk about how his favorite part of being kind of a head coach was building the relationships. He said, I love coaching, that the relationships you have with the players, those things just don't have the same meaning as they once did. Now, he doesn't say that's bad. He just says it's different. And I will pound the table until the end of time that bad and different are two different things. Different does not necessarily mean bad. It's just different. And college football is now different. It is a business. It's always been a business. It's just now that we're getting around to treating it like a business. But kudos to Nick Saban for saying, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying the way I want to build my program, the way my 72-year-old ass wants to operate, create my program, or in his case, program, and build off of that. The way I have always operated is different than what is necessary to be successful today. And if that's the case, I'm not likely to change in my ways. Therefore, I'm not likely to continue to be successful. Therefore, it is time for me to go. And I think that is a hell of a spot to be in and deserves all of the accolades, because it's easy in that situation to have an enormous ego and say, to hell with the way where the sport is going, the way the sport operates. Damn it, I'm Nick Saban, and I'm going to be successful no matter what. It's so easy to have that thought process, that statement, that sentiment, that attitude towards the sport. I've had so much success in this arena that I can buck the trends that are approaching the sport and still be successful. Nick Saban said, I can't. And I know my limitations. And I know that I'm not going to be successful if I do this, if I continue to operate the way that I am currently. And since I'm 72 years old, the likelihood of me changing my entire philosophy on how to operate in this space, it ain't going to happen. So it's time for me to go. And I think it showcases why Nick Saban is the greatest of all time. Because even as back in the early 2010s, when they're still running the football out of the I formation in Alabama, and it worked because you get superior athletes to everybody else. But he recognized, okay, the sport is about to pass me by if I don't change with it. So I need to adapt. I need to come out of my shell a little bit and work with younger people who view things differently than I do and are going to set us up for more success in the future. And again, it takes a bunch of cojones to do that, because why mess with what is working? Why tinker? Why, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it wasn't broke, and Nick Saban fixed it anyway. And the 2023 Alabama football program, going into the 2024 Alabama football program, was not broken by any stretch of the imagination. They are a likely college football playoff contender in 2024 with a new coach. And despite all of the transfers that happened after Nick Saban leaves, it wasn't broke, and yet he fixed it. He said, I'm not doing this. And again, you can look at that cynically and say, did the NIL and transfer portal chase Nick Saban off? Or you can say, look at it and say, college players are different than they were when I first began this. It's just different. And I'm not as adaptable to it at 72 and after all the success that I've had as maybe some other people. And at risk of the game passing me by, at risk of me doing damage to this program, this university, this athletic department, and these kids that I have grown to love and appreciate, I'll step away. I think that is an impressive mindset to have. And when that's your mindset and you make a decision like that one to say, you know what? I've done all I can do. I've had my fun. Let's go home. When you're making a decision of that magnitude and you're still viewing it, in my opinion, in the correct context, from the correct angle, from the right manner, I think you deserve commendations for that. So I think even in deciding to retire, Nick Saban shows why and how he got to be the greatest of all time. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content that we're pumping out here on Saturday Glory. If you are listening on a podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow here on the Daily Huddle with Saturday Glory.